Hello students, hope you all are in the best of your health. So today we will read novel chapter 29, The Other Children Go Home, and chapter 30, Charlie's Chocolate Factory. But before that, let's just look at the previous chapter briefly. That is chapter 28, Only Charlie Left. So, after Mike TV's incident, Charlie is the only child left in the factory. And when Mr. Wonka realizes this, he tells Charlie that he has won. Mr. Wonka starts off on another of his thing, talking about all the things that need to get done and the arrangements that need to be made. Charlie could tell that something crazy is about to happen, but he's just thrilled, and his grandpa Joe. Suddenly, they are back on the elevator, and Mr. Wonka is pressing the button labeled up and out. It shoots straight up in the air. Willy Wonka admits that he's never had the chance to press this button until now because he hadn't wanted to break a big hole in the roof of his factory. Sure enough, the elevator crashes through the ceiling, and but it just stops, floating in mid-air, towering over the entire town. It is powered by sugar power, and from the sky they can see all the other children returning home. Now let's start with chapter 29. And in this chapter, Mr. Wonka brings the glass elevator lower to allow Charlie to see the other children leaving the factory. Charlie only notices three other children, and Mr. Wonka explains that Mike TV will be along soon. He then explains that the trucks below are filled with the first installment of lifetime supply of chocolate for each child. Mr. Wonka points out Augustus Gloop, who is now quite thin. Mr. Wonka explains that each of the other children has changed. Augustus is thinner from being squeezed in the pipe. Violet is blue in the face through. She seems otherwise normal. Veruca is covered with garbage. Then Mike TV appears, taller and thinner than anyone else. Charlie think it is terrible that Mike TV is clearly being overstretched. But Mr. Wonka assures him that the mistake will be fortunate for Mike, as he will be pursued by every basketball team in the country. Mr. Wonka sends the elevator skyward again, telling Charlie that he must speak to him about something important. Heading to chapter 30, Charlie's Chocolate Factory. Alright, as Mr. Wonka wanted to talk to Charlie about something very important, Mr. Wonka tells Charlie that how much he loves his factory. He then asks what Charlie thinks of it, and Charlie replies that he loves it too. It was a quite obvious answer. Thrilled with Charlie's response, Mr. Wonka explains to Charlie that he has decided to give the factory to him. Charlie is speechless. Grandpa Joe thinks he is joking, but Mr. Wonka assures him that he is not. He explains to Charlie that he is an old man and cannot go on forever. He is looking for a child like Charlie who will run the factory exactly the way he does. He believes an adult would want to change things, and he does not want that to happen. Charlie immediately understands the idea behind the golden tickets now. Mr. Wonka explains that the child be like pest would get the factory. and Grandpa Joe remains speechless and astounded. Mr. Wonka turns the elevator in the direction of Charlie's home. He explains that Charlie's entire family can move into the factory. Charlie says his mother will not be able to come because she must tend to his other grandparents. Mr. Wonka says Charlie's grandparents can come too and assures Charlie the details will sort themselves out. He then announces that he will crash right through the roof of Charlie's home. Charlie and Grandpa shout for him to stop, but they are too late. The elevator crashes through the roof on Mr. And there was raining derbies on Mr. Bucket's family. Mr. and Mrs. Bucket run into the room, amazed at the damage, while the grandparents shout for help. Grandpa Joe, Charlie, and Mr. Wonka exit the elevator, telling everyone to remain calm as they recount their story. The grandparents scream and refuse to leave the house, ignoring their screams. Mr. Wonka, Charlie, and Grandpa Joe push the bed into the elevator. Mr. and Mrs. Bucket followed them. As the elevator ascends, Charlie claims that that they are going to settle down in a wondrous place forever now. By saying this, Charlie calms his grandparents and explains that they are going to the most wonderful place in the world. One grandparent wonders if there will be food at their destination, and in the reply, Charlie laughs, telling them to wait and see for what wonders they are going to have in their lives now. All right, I hope you got the meaning and you got the main idea what these two chapters are about. I want you to come in the beginning of chapter 30 because I want to tell you the meanings of some words and some phrases in this chapter. And let's start with this word gazing down. The word gazing down here means to keep on looking at someone or something. This means to stare at someone or something. Then here in this paragraph, cocked his head to one side. Now here this phrase means to turn or to raise his or her hand to one side. Then comes here the word stammered. This word stammered means to take pauses while speaking or to take sudden involuntary pauses and to repeat the initial letters of the words while speaking. Then here it is. It's in ruins. Now, this phrase means something completely spoiled. As poor Mr. Bucket says this when Mr. Wonka's elevator crashed into their house. Here is one more phrase I want you to look at is you must not despair. Despair means to lose hope or to be distressed. Last one. Still petrified with fear. Now here all the grandparents were terrified. They were frightened and were unable to move. So, petrified with fear means so frightened that one is unable to move, and it could mean terrified as well. Alright, now the questions you have to answer. Why Mr. Wonka wanted Charlie to have the factory? Alright, I want you to just look at the paragraph in on the first page. Here it is. Mr. Wonka is old enough and he have got no children and family. Second point you can add up to this question is he does not want to give his factory to a grown up, and the reason is stated here. Third one, Charlie is a good, sensible, loving child. So this might be the reason why Mr. Wonka wants Charlie to be the owner of the factory now. Then the second question, how does Charlie calm down his grandparents? So here in this paragraph, read it out. He might ask them not to be frightened, or just to tell the wondrous things about the factory. Maybe this could help him to calm down his grandparents. Alright, I hope you got the meaning of this chapter and the questions and all is clear to you. Alright, thank you.